Oh, yeah. We are recording. Oops, Alana is on mute and we can't, and I can't hear her play. It's not playing.
Am I off mute now?
No, you're off mute. Yes, so play. Hello. So I put people into gallery view, but it seems not to want to do into gallery view. Oh, there are 19 of us on board. I'm Sue Walton. I'm the administrator of the Council of Georgist Organizations, and I'm here to welcome you to an appreciation for Walt and Erica Rybeck. And I'm now going to turn this over to Alana Hartzog, the administrator of the International Union for Land Value Taxation, who came to us with this idea of celebrating our good friend Walt and Erica. So, Alana.
Okay, thank you everyone who's joined us today. I'm going to read a bio about Walt's life, which how can you do justice to 96 years? But it's going to be a bio, and I also want to draw your attention to Walt's wonderful book. It's called Resolving the Economic Puzzle. And in his book that was published by Shepard Walwyn in 2011, he weaves together much of his life experience over all the decades, from being a young person to his college, his war experience, his discovery of Henry George. And what's so fascinating about Walt's book is, for all of us, he's weaving his personal story together with a really big picture of Henry George economics and people he meet that he worked with Henry George economics. So it really kind of shows the evolution of our movement as well through the many decades. So Walt's wonderful son, Rick, is going to show some photos, some family photos. Can we see them?
All right, I'm going to share my, I'm going to give Rick permission. Rick, you should be able to share your screen at this point.
I don't see a button here.
It's a green button
to share my screen.
On the bottom.
I don't have it. I also don't think you see my video, do you?
No, I see only your face. Which is a.
So yeah, we see the
like
video.
A photo.
Well, yeah, it's a photo, not a live video of your face.
Yeah, so I'm going to leave the meeting and try to rejoin with video.
Wait, whoa. Let me try one more thing, Rick. Hold on here. Hold on. I just promoted you to panelist. You should be able to do this. Yes. So. Okay.
Yes.
Aha. Now you see the button. Okay. Hey. Here we are. There we are. There's the guest of honor and things. So all right.
There's my dad and
hi,
and I see the share screen button. So I will start sharing my screen, and we'll rock and roll.
Okay. Okie doke. You know, when I open, oh, look at all those. When I opened Walt's book today, I found this little slip of paper. It said, "You are not forgotten." It's a quote from Isaiah. "Divide your bread with the hungry, bring the homeless into the house. When you see the naked, cover him, and do not divert your eyes from your own flesh." Isaiah 58:7. You are not forgotten. Walt, we want to know how much we respect and appreciate your wonderful life and the contribution that you've made over all these decades. So Walt Rybeck was born in Wheeling, West Virginia. His parents, Rye and Buddy Rybeck, were from New York and relocated to Wheeling in the 1920s when Walt's dad got a management job in a department store there. During the 1920s, a Colonel Ogilvy donated his large estate to Wheeling. This estate, located several miles outside of town, was inaccessible to most people because few people owned cars at that time. Wheeling's government saw this donation as an expensive liability and was intending to sell it off. But Buddy Rybeck, along with the Good family and others, decided this would be a big mistake. They volunteered to create picnic areas and educational programs. They started natural history and folk dance programs, among other activities. Walt's appreciation for nature was fostered by his parents and his teachers at Ogilvy Park. Walt's college education was interrupted by World War II. After different training programs, he ended up in an engineering battalion that arrived in France just as the war in Europe ended. He made some lifelong friends with returning war refugees in the town of Epernay, where he was stationed. I want to read a little bit from his book on one of his experiences. He says, I moved from an anti-aircraft outfit in Fort Bliss, Texas, to engineering training at Oklahoma A&M, to the infantry in mid-Texas, to the combat engineers in a Mississippi swamp, to Morse code training at Fort Belvoir, Virginia. Our battalion went overseas late in the war. Crossing the English Channel at night, a depth charge alarm sent all hands on deck, except for me. Sound asleep on the top of the stack of 6 bunks, I woke as the all clear signal brought troops back to the quarters. All I can say is thank goodness you survived that one, Walt. So Walt finished his education at Antioch College in Yellow Springs, Ohio, and he has anecdotes from that period in his book as well. So I wanted to read one of those anecdotes that I thought you would all find interesting. It's under Eating in the Kitchen. Coretta Scott was one of my closest college friends. She was an aspiring singer before she married Martin Luther King Jr. Hearing her tell about the indignities her family suffered while she was growing up in Alabama was heartbreaking. Black churches around Ohio invited her to sing, and I went along to accompanist. Now, you should know that Walt is an excellent piano player. Mixed race couples were seldom seen in those times, but were never physically harmed as we traveled by bus. But if looks could kill, we were relieved to teach the churches and reach them where the audiences invariably received me with the same warmth as Coretta. So after college, Walt became a journalist. He decided to take a year to travel around South America. He would pay his way by writing a column, a far cry from home, to several West Virginia newspapers. He was among a very small number of English-speaking journalists in Bogota during a coup, allowing some of the West Virginia papers to move Walt's travel column into the news section. Walt was very interested in the gross inequality between the rich and poor. He interviewed government officials, and after one meeting, the official told Walter, "You speak Spanish like a native." Well, Walt left the meeting feeling very gratified that his Spanish was so well received. However, he soon realized that the official meant that Walt spoke Spanish like the Native Americans, who spoke horrible Spanish. In Ecuador, he met a woman who, upon learning about Walt's love of nature, recommended a trip to the Galapagos Islands. She told Walt that there was a Navy mailboat that went to the islands every week or so. So Walt caught a boat to the islands. What an adventurous guy we have here, huh? The Navy boat did not return for 3 months. During that time, Walt became well acquainted with a few Robinson Crusoe families who scraped out a subsistence living there. This unplanned adventure remains one of the highlights of his life because of these friendships and because he was able to get so close to wild animals that had no fear of humans. Once back in the USA, Walt began his journalism career in Columbus, Ohio, and then took an editorial job at the Dayton Daily News in Dayton, Ohio. While there, he met Erika Schulhoff. They fell in love and remain married to this day. And that one sentence is a remarkable accomplishment. How long have has
Here.
you've been married, Walt, and with Erica? How many years?
How many years?
66.
66 years.
66. Oh, isn't that amazing? That's almost unknown to my generation. So I wanted to mention something very important about Erica. Walt's wife, Erica, wrote a book, and it's called On My Own, Decoding the Conspiracy of Silence, a memoir by Erica Schulhoff Rybeck. You can get that several places online. That talks about her experience as a child being shipped off on train out of Vienna by her parents to England, where she grew up and then made her way to the United States. And most of her family were killed in the Holocaust. So this is her very important memoir. During the 1950s, Walt became acquainted with the Henry George movement. He was pretty skeptical at first, but the more he looked into the ideas, the more it seemed to make sense. In the early 1960s, Walt moved to Washington, D.C. as the bureau chief for Cox Newspapers, the owners of the Dayton Daily News. Shortly thereafter, he became an associate director for the National Commission on Urban Problems. This commission, created by President Lyndon Johnson, was headed up by former Illinois Senator Paul Douglas. Walt soon discovered that Douglas also had a deep affinity for Henry George. Walt spent several years assisting Senator Douglas with the commission's work and writing up its findings. In the late 1960s, Walt went to work for the Urban Institute as an editor, helping translate the findings of researchers into language that could be understood by legislators and others interested in improving social and economic conditions. Walt then assisted a Congressman, Henry Royce from Wisconsin, and then Congressman William Coyne from Pittsburgh. In the late 1970s, Walt started the Center for Public Dialogue, a firm dedicated to helping communities through policies consistent with the teachings of Henry George. During this time, Walt's brother Art took up the cause in West Virginia, and the two of them collaborated on this for several years. Most recently, Walt convened a group of Georgist activists to promote property tax reform in Baltimore. Alana has been ably taking care of the role of facilitating the group's activities while Walt remains an active member. And this group is an outcome, you should all know, of the 2018 CGO conference in Baltimore. I'm sure most of you participated in that. From the 1960s until today, Walt has been an active participant in and supporter of Georgist causes and organizations. Walt is now the patriarch of an extended family that loves and reveres him. And just everybody's going to get a chance to talk and express their appreciation. Put anything you want in chat or raise your hand. And I'm going to start off to say, Walt, thank you. I so appreciate you. You've been such a kind friend and a wise mentor, always supportive. I've never heard you say anything negative about anybody at all. You are truly a loving, kind, brilliant Georgist and human being. And I'm so happy to have known you for all these years. And hello, I see Eric in the background. I'm so glad she's here with us. Okay, so I know John Kelly wanted to speak. John, are you able to unmute? And then I'll see who else wants to talk.
I have to unmute him. Hold on. Here.
Okay.
Please.
All right, I believe I'm unmuted.
Yes.
You are.
Okay. Walt, I would just, I'm thrilled to be able to thank you publicly for all the wonderful, wonderful help you've given me over the years. Walt and I think, spoke for the first time about 38 years ago. I was referred to him by Steve Cord and Dan Sullivan, And I think, Walt, we met for the first time at the conference, that first conference in St. Louis. But Walt has always been a great sounding board for me and my crazy ideas about what to do in Peoria. And by the way, Walt, we are doing very well. We just passed tax abatement in some of our older neighborhoods with an income tax rebate attached to it. It's very innovative, and I think it will be very successful. But Walt's book is wonderful, and I shouldn't leave out Erica's book, which is also wonderful. I'd highly recommend them to the audience today. Of course, they're each very different books, but very, very good. And Erica, I've had a number of people read my copy. Maybe we should have bought more copies. That would be nicer for you. But anyway, anyhow, I would just like to, Walt, thank you so much. You've been such a stalwart, I think for all of us, but for me in particular. And you've had a wonderful life, and I just hope I can be as influential and as good a man as you have been. Thank you very much.
John, wonderful of you to give up part of your Sunday afternoon for this. One of the joys of the Georgist movement is meeting and getting to know wonderful people like you and Ilana and the whole gang of individualists. Thank you so much, John. Great to be in touch with you.
Very
We'll
well.
have, thank you. We'll have Mark Sullivan next.
I did not know I was on a list.
Saw your hand up.
Pardon?
I saw your hand up, so.
But it wasn't.
Okay, well, it's still
However-
up. I still see it.
However, and I don't, obviously you can't turn my camera on. I've known Walt, I guess since around 1980. And he stood out both for his calm intelligence and wisdom and humor, his smile, and the fact that for a rather local, scattered herd of cats type of movement, Walt was our person in Washington. And so I appreciated all of his efforts. He was doing the kind of outreach that would not come at all naturally to me, dealing with the people in power in the nation's capital. And I thought, and I think Walt brings his own perspective in light of that experience. And I'm happy to see your face on the screen, and wish you a happy Passover, which I believe is a holiday you celebrate. Correct me if I'm wrong. And hope we see you again. Thank
Thank
you,
you
Walt.
so much. Passover is an appropriate time to talk about Henry George, because Moses, who led the Exodus from Egypt, wanted everybody to have everybody to have his or her own part of the earth that belongs to everybody. So it's very appropriate that we think of the land issue and Passover at the same time. Moses the economist is not well enough known, but we'll do our best to, to keep that story alive. And it's wonderful the many years of effort that you gave the movement. Mark, thank you so much for being with me this afternoon.
Thank you for the opportunity, Walt. My partner Osamu sends his greetings as well. And we're sitting here listening, and we'll be present until the end of this webinar, which I think is wonderful. And thanks to Alana, Rick, and Sue for making it happen.
Okay, I see Alan Ridley's hand up, and to everyone, either put in chat that you want to speak, or just put your hand up and I'll hope to see you. Alan,
Okay, can you hear me?
yes.
Okay, yeah, Walt, I just wanted to thank you again for stepping up to finishing. I guess you can't see me for some reason, but anyway, I'm here. And I wanted to thank you for stepping up to helping finish Tale of Five Cities under difficult circumstances, I understand. And I also wondered if you keep in touch with Yellow Springs, Ohio and Antioch. I went to a workshop there on peak oil many years ago and discovered a wonderful group. I think it's called Community Solutions. And they have ties to Henry George, but they're not big ties, and but there's a connection there, and I wish we would cultivate those connections. And they're also doing a project called Agraria, where they teach young people about being a good steward to the land and so on. So I just wondered how connected you still are to Antioch, and I wish you could tickle the ivories for us too.
Yeah, I do keep in touch with some folks in Yellow Spring, Antioch. And of course, you know that one of my philosophy professor when I was there was the author of The Philosophy of Henry George. His father was the founder of the Henry George School.
Who was that?
George
Geiger?
I'm having trouble with his last name.
Wasn't Chatterjee, was
Hmm?
wasn't Chatterjee?
No.
Was there another one?
And it wasn't George Geiger?
George Geiger?
George Geiger, of course. And he was so blackballed by the philosophy profession at that time that he rarely mentioned Henry George in his classes. But when I found out after graduating that his important writings about Henry George, every time we would get together, he said, "How are we doing with the single tax?" And he revived his interest and influence. Wonderful man. And he had a hobby of acting. He was a very popular actor in Yellow Springs, Ohio.
Okay, wonderful.
Thank you.
Ted, thanks, Alan. Ted Gordy's gonna be next, and then George Collins. And Sue, is it possible to have the video on for everybody so we can all see each other? So Ted, you can go ahead.
Okay, hi, Walt. I'm happy to be here. I read Progress and Poverty in 1963 and decided to make a career in the assessment field because of my interest in real estate. I know that you became very interested in what I was doing in Southfield, Michigan, and in my future work in other places. So you've been one of the people that has been a supporter and of real background and interest to everything I've done in my life. And I wanted to thank you for your support and your being. And I remember working with you and Art a couple of times in West Virginia and other places. And I look forward to all the help and love that you've given to everyone. And so best wishes, Walt.
Thank you, Ted. You're a real star of our movement. It's wonderful to have you as a friend.
So now, thank you. We'll go to George Collins. And Sue, is it possible that we can have video, or can people just turn their video on if they wish? Sue?
I think they need to start video. They go into
No,
the
yeah,
little
start
corner in the
video, and
right.
I am actually promoting everybody to panelists as we speak. So it takes me a few minutes, and I did try to do this just a minute ago. Let me try to promote George to panelists and things. So yes, it may not show up, but we'll do that. Okay.
Oh, it's coming back. It's back.
Okay,
Hello?
George.
Can you hear me?
George,
Hello?
yes.
Am I
Yes.
being heard? Yes. Well, I want to say, first of all, congratulations to you.
George, I need you to speak up a little more.
Okay. I want first to say congratulations to Walt for the many years of extraordinary work that he has done in the Georgist movement, and probably as important as the work that he personally accomplished is to have brought his family into the movement as well. That is something that most Georgists have had the most difficult time achieving. So you're to be congratulated on that count as well. There are many things to remember about your participation in this great cause. But one thing that has stuck with me all these years was your participation at a program that was held at the New York School in the 1980s. I don't remember exactly what the program was, but during the event, there was a sit-in, well, not a sit-in actually, poor people had entered Tompkins Square Park in the Lower East Side and were declared to be squatting in the park. They built tents and in other words, took over the park. And on the panel at the school, the question was put to you about what you thought about these squatters in the park. And your reply is one of the most simple and profound responses that I've heard to any question regarding Georgism. You said that, in a sense, we're all squatters on this planet. The question is, on what terms some of us are permitted to squat. That I thought was a most trenchant statement, and it has lived with me all these years. I think of it every time I think through the Georgist paradigm. Thank you very much, Walt.
Wonderful. It's been
George,
suggested, I'm
Did
sorry.
I pay you
Yeah.
enough to say all those nice things? George, you're awfully nice. I love your philosophy. I love your singing. I love your friendship. Wonderful memories. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Walt.
Ed is suggesting it's probably a good idea if Rick might end the share screen, and then we can better see everybody now that we're starting to see everybody. And then we can view everybody written large.
Video.
All right, so let's see.
Oh, there I am.
Hey, there's George.
Yeah.
Here, let me put myself back on.
Okay, who wants to go next? I don't know. Got to speak up.
I think Bill Back had a question and comment.
Okay, Bill.
Yeah, Walt, over all the years you've been involved in the Georgist movement and having worked in the media and politics, I'd like to know the names and the stories of any people that you might have made converts to the Georgist movement? We know there are people that you met that were in agreement, but have you had any great successes?
Well, we're gonna win. We don't know when, but our day is coming. And I just admire you and all the others who are fighting a good fight to help people understand. They've tried everything else. They'll finally come our way. Thank you for all you do.
Alana, may I raise my hand?
Please,
to speak?
Ted, this is, Walter is your uncle,
Well,
is that
also
right?
he's
Or something?
he's
Go
a
ahead.
he's also, in addition to my uncle, a persuader. So I'm picking up, sir, on your last comment of, has he persuaded anyone who hadn't come around on his own or their own? And that would be me. So one of you mentioned that you read Progress in Poverty in 1963. And that was auspicious for me because I was born in 1963 and fortunate enough to have Walt and Erica as my aunt and uncle. And like all of Walt's family, I revere Walt's commitment to more just economics, in addition to adoring Walt as a person. And I wrote a little bit here about that. And let me just share. Walt inspired his one sibling, my father, Art Rybeck, to work on land tax reform in West Virginia, where they grew up and where I'm from too. Because of Walt and Rick's influence, I've been interested in Georgist thought as well, and have been quoting the two of them in policy papers as a government intern starting 40 years ago or so, and in my work now on local business recovery and reinvention. Specifically, I happen to be working with leaders in Cleveland right now who brought together 1,000 organizations across the city as they aspire to build a green city on a blue lake. Because of coaching from Walt, they learned just again last week about Mayor Tom Johnson, who was there in the mayoral role from 1901 to 1909, their hometown hero, the famously effective administrator and a staunch Georgist. There's a statue of Mayor Johnson in town, but the group, or at least many of them, their leaders, hadn't realized that Cleveland had already been a famously green city under Mayor Johnson. And until they got that refreshed insight via Walt Rybeck. So here's to Walt's Johnny Appleseed ability to plant important ideas wherever he goes. So I call Walt Rybeck Uncle Walt, not Uncle Johnny Appleseed, but I am an example of someone who was an economics major in school, have dedicated my life to enterprise growth initiatives, and I'm interested in just economics as a passion, but would never have done that from a Georgist perspective if it weren't for Walt and Rick and being around anyone Aunt Erica thinks we should be around, because, you know, her good taste sort of drives everything in our family. So, mwah.
What? How lucky to have a family that supports you. Some Georgists have had a problem of kind of feeling that Henry George was a competitive feature that standing in the way of good human relation. I'm lucky enough to have a whole family of supporters, with Ted being a fantastic supporter. Thank you, Ted. Love you.
And this is another segue. I don't know if Nicholas Rosen, if you want to speak, or at least I'm going to read what you wrote in chat. And if you want to speak, you can unmute yourself. So Nick Rosen writes, when I first got in touch with organized Georgism around 1980, I read about Walter Rybeck and the Tale of 5 Cities. 20 years later, when I had finished graduate school and had a job with vacation time, I began attending Georgist conferences and met the gentleman himself, as well as his brother Art and his son Rick. That's appreciation from Nicholas.
Wonderful.
Hello?
There you are.
Do people hear me? I'm Nicholas.
Yes.
We hear
Go
you,
ahead.
Nick.
Oh, okay, good. Anyway, I have not had the privilege of knowing Mr. Rybeck as well as some of my fellow Georgists, but I have been very glad to talk with them. You know, we have met at several Georgist conferences, that kind of thing. And I remember also, I've already said this, I guess, talking with his brother Art, the dentist who provided low-cost dental services to people in West Virginia. Let's not forget that. And I have, of course, I guess I didn't mention this yet, also met the lovely Erica, and I'm glad to see that she's still with us. 66 years, congratulations.
Well, thank you, Nicholas. This is Rick speaking. And you know, my dad's a newspaper man, and he's always amazed and appreciative of your success in getting letters to the editor.
Oh, you do a great job. Nick has the art of brevity and getting right to the point. He's really a model teacher of how to write a letter to the editor about Henry George and the land issue.
Okay, so Ed Dotson, and then after that, I'm going to read what Polly wrote in chat, and if she wants to then say anything, do so. Ed.
Took me a few seconds to unmute. Hello, Erica, and hello, Walt. Nice to see both of you. Erica, it's been such a long time. But fortunately, I've had the pleasure of Walt's company even in recent years. I wanted to remind Walt that he graciously agreed to co-author a paper with me some years ago that made its way into one or more of the Georgist publications. My work on housing always seemed to overlap a lot of what Walt was doing. But anyway, some years after I retired from Fannie Mae, I managed to get a meeting scheduled in Washington with Congressman Paul Georgist, and I needed assistance. So who did I call upon? I called upon Walt, and he came to the meeting, and we spent about an hour with the congressman, who promised us all sorts of good things, right, Walt? And he did absolutely nothing, of course. But we tried to move the mountain, and I really appreciated him being there to give me support for that. The other thing that I wanted to mention, a couple of things I really want to mention. One is, as part of my sort of unofficial role as movement historian, you can find just about everything that Walt has written that's been published under his biographical listing in the School of Cooperative Individualism website. So I invite everyone to read some of his really great articles and essays. I read his book when it first came out, and like many of you, I discovered many things about Walt that I hadn't known because of our work together. And I have to tell him, I think I have already said this before, that his discussion of his relationship with Coretta Scott and then Martin Luther King Jr. Prompted me to prepare a PowerPoint presentation on Martin Luther King Jr. and his economic philosophy that I have taught with good results a number of times. And I've recorded it, so it's up on YouTube if you want to take that in. But I give Walt credit for bringing to my attention the fact that Martin Luther King Jr. actually wrote something a little bit about Henry George, knew something about Henry George because of Walt. So Walt, keep up the good work. I hope you keep it up for another decade or longer.
Yeah.
Here.
And I'm always there to help you if you need me. Thank you so much.
Really treasure your friendship, Ed, and your stimulation. You do wonderful work. Thank you so much for taking time this Sunday afternoon to be with me. Thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Okay, so Polly wrote in chat, Polly Cleveland, that Douglas was responsible for the income tax deductibility of new improvements, which Mace Gaffney credited for the 1960s economic boom. And she was wondering, can Walt tell us about the story? Because you were working with Paul Douglas at that time.
Well, I'm not sure. What's the question?
The question was that Polly said that, was it Paul Douglas who introduced an income tax deduction for improvements?
You know, my memory is failing me on that right now. Be frank. It sounds likely, but I don't want to give you the wrong information.
Okay, so Polly, if you want to speak, just there you
that
go.
the effect of making new improvements deductible, which eventually was taken away under Reagan, but it brought the income tax closer to a land value tax. In other words, it made it more of a tax on rent, and that was one of Douglas's innovations. And I was just wondering, you know, if you remembered any of that story, because for economists, that was a very significant move.
Exactly. Well, it sounds like Douglas. He insisted on hanging his picture of Henry George above my desk to make sure he was looking over my shoulder while I was working with Douglas.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
In his autobiography, he says he wished St. Peter would forgive him for not doing more for the land tax, but I think he did a lot for what he was able to do at that time under those circumstances.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for everything you've done for the movement.
Well, and you've been doing a great job too.
Thank you.
Wonder if Dan has something to say, because he's been muted. Dan Sullivan's on the line. And I know that Dan has always made sure that Walt has been available to us when we had conferences in, quote, his old stomping ground of Pittsburgh.
I just wanted to add something real quick, if I could. And that is that I forwarded to you, Walt, and also Alana and Sue, the information about Agraria in Yellow Springs, Ohio. It's a kind of exciting development. There are a lot of young people and a lot of good energy around stewardship of the land there. So thank you for reminding me of that. And I didn't have everybody's email, so Sue, maybe you can forward it to everybody else. Get it. Thank you very much. Sure. And thank you again, Walt.
If you're in touch with those folks and they'd like me to give a little talk about Henry George Geiger and Antioch, Arthur Morgan also did a fantastic job of land taxation after the 1913 floods, and the dams were built and people paid off the Conservancy district cost with the land tax. So there's a big story there in
Wow.
Antioch. I'd be happy to give a little talk about that at Antioch anytime they want to hear it.
I think Chad is referring to the Miami River Flood Conservancy. A lot of times you hear about Miami, you think Florida, but the Miami River is in Ohio. And Arthur Morgan devised a flood control system there. And as Dad said, the dam construction was paid off by the increase in land value from areas that were saved from flood damage.
Wow, that's huge. Thank you.
Alana, I think I'm not the Dan from Pittsburgh. I'm the Dan from Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I happen to be Walt's nephew. Happy to be here.
Wonderful. Do you want to say more than that?
Well, I could say many things, but since this is a Georgist gathering.
No. This is really an honor Walt Rybeck's life gathering. So please go ahead, Dan.
But I will say from my earliest days, I remember conversations between my dad and Walt and others in living rooms and around dinner tables. And although I didn't understand the conversation, I certainly understood that serious business was being taken care of. And that's an important thing for a young man to learn. So even though today I'm still not sure I understand everything that Walt's proposing, I know that it's serious business. So thank you, Walt.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
If I could, Alana, just to pick up on Brother Dan there for a moment, could Walt answer a question, which is for all of us who care about important movements, your persistence, Paul, Uncle Walt, your persistence at working on something that you care about, given whether it's the environmental movement or justice in all of its realms, do you have any advice about what's kept you going, given the number of setbacks that you've seen over the years? What keeps you persevering?
Well, that's a good question, but it makes us appreciate the people who fought for women's suffrage. They all had these setbacks, and to be a winner of a lost cause, you just have to do your homework and keep at it and not lose your sense of humor or your sense of perspective.
Great advice. I'm writing it down.
I know that Chuck Metellus can't speak because he has Zoom doesn't like his monitor, his microphone. But if Chuck, you'd like to put comments in the chat, please do. How about Nadine Stoner? If Nadine can talk, she can unmute. And if I can unmute her. She's got to unmute on her side. I can't mute on this side. I know that Mark and I just tried working on his camera and it's not working. Technical difficulties.
You have 23 people on this. It's wonderful.
It definitely is wonderful and everything. And I'm having fun. I mean, I have to say that this has energized me in more ways than one. An hour ago, I was really sleepy. I'm going, how am I going to put myself through this? This is making me live. It's very exciting. And my thanks to Alana and to Rick for bringing this up, and we just put it together. This may not have been the exact format that we thought, but hey, we're working on this. So, anybody else want to say anything? There's Tom Gearing and there's Wayne Looney on here and Mike O'Mara, who have not said anything.
Chuck Metellus.
Yeah. Chuck Metellus can't do it.
Audio.
I'd like to hear from Dr. James Fredrickson.
Yeah, there's Jim.
Congratulations, Mr. Rybeck, for all the contributions that you've made. It was a privilege to learn about your work from my father and to meet you at a Georgist meeting back in St. Louis back in the 80s.
Good. See if I can.
Go ahead.
I just learned a lot from your father, and it's wonderful that you're carrying on the fight. What is your profession, or are you retired now?
I'm retired. I was a heart surgeon. I worked at Northwestern Memorial Hospital in Chicago, and I'm now.
Wonderful.
I-
Wonderful. Well, great to be in touch with the Frederickson, a great name in the Georgist movement.
Alana, this is Ed. I had a comment in the chat. It wasn't for Walt. I just wanted to comment on how distinguished George Collins looks with his beard and mustache.
Yeah.
All you have to do to achieve that is to get old.
Yeah.
I couldn't grow such a beard if I took 20 years from now. But I did want to ask, Walt, as he's been involved with our latest efforts to try to get Baltimore to become, a land value tax community. City. Okay. What do you think about the strategy that we've undertaken? And do you think it's something that the Georgists should try to do as groups around the country?
Well, just so you all know, Donald Trump really bashed Baltimore a couple years ago. The previous year, we had held a conference there, and people were interested in the land tax. But when I said, let's show that Donald Trump maybe missed the boat on that, and that Baltimore could shine, and some people took it up. So we're trying to launch something there. I don't know how this would work in other cities, but you just take your chances where you find them.
Thanks, Walt.
Be with all of you this afternoon.
Hi.
Tom Gehring?
Yeah, let's see if I can start. Am I there? I don't see it, but.
We can hear you.
You want to share screen, Tom?
We can hear you.
Oh,
You want to
To share his
I
video.
think you can see me, can't you?
No, we can't see you for some reason.
So.
But we can hear you.
Start video.
Oh, well, let's see.
There. Hey, nope.
What do you see?
I see Zoom, but to see your screen, yes.
Oh, well, that doesn't help.
Oh, you did share screen. You want to do start video at the bottom left. The little
Yes.
camera.
Stop share.
Should be popping up.
The Mac, it's on the top right. There's three little dots.
Thanks, Alan.
Yes.
There he is.
There he is.
Oh,
There he is.
somewhere?
Yes. There you are. We got you.
Okay.
All right.
Well, this goes way back, and Walt might not remember, but back in 1990, and George knows all about this. I was living in Seattle at a group house that was owned by Eugene Levin. Many of you know Eugene.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the one that introduced me to Georgism, because living with him, he just wouldn't shut up. So, he had to convert everybody. So he found out I was a professional urban planner, so he said, and a consultant. So he said, when did you do a piece of work for us on land value taxation? I said, I don't know much about it, but I'll try it. So actually, at that time, Walt came into Seattle and presented his case with a book, a pamphlet that he had written called Look to the Land. Do you remember that, Walt?
I sure do.
It was a green book, and I was looking for it. I just couldn't find it, but I'm sure I still have it. But this is the first report that I ever did. Can you see it?
Mhm.
The first report that I did, application of a hypothetical 2-rate property tax in King County. This is my introduction to the 2-rate tax. And there it is for the Washington State Georgist. It was an active group then, but all those old guys died off, and there's not many people left in Seattle and Washington any longer. Hopefully we get some young people, but at any rate, it continued from there. So I did one study after another. They actually paid me for one. And it continues even today.
Incidentally, Tom, how did you make out? He was, his bill in Oregon was going to go for a hearing 2 weeks ago?
Oh, yes, we had, oh, no, yes. We had a hearing in the House Financing Committee on our land value tax study bill. And it got very favorable reception by the committee members, and we had quite a lot of positive testimony coming in. It just kind of overwhelmed the committee, I'm sure. And there was really no opposition to it at all. But the working session hasn't been scheduled yet, but hopefully that'll come up soon, where they'll take a vote. But I cannot see how they wouldn't pass it and send it off to Senate.
That's good.
That's where we are.
Nice.
Well,
Great work,
anyway,
Tom.
that's a tribute to Rick.
Right.
That's enough for me.
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah.
We've been coming across, and this is a sign of hope for us, I think, from people that aren't that closely affiliated with our movement per se, but saying things like Henry George, an American economist whose work is being revived in the 21st century. And every now and then we're coming across articles on land value tax from people, well, we've never heard of around the world. So something is emerging once again for us to catch the wave, I believe. And like Walt said earlier, they've tried everything else. They better go back to Henry George and land value tax.
Right, now here, I do see Mr. Dan Sullivan has popped in, and so there he is. Dan, would you like to talk?
Eventually.
Eventually, yes.
I just got here, so I'll
Amen.
listen a little.
Well, welcome. We've been having a wonderful conversation and appreciation of Walt's life.
Well, while Dan is getting his thoughts together, this is Rick. I'll chime in just briefly, sort of piggybacking on what you said, Alana, about other groups, people we haven't heard of who are getting on board. Some people may have heard about the Strong Towns movement. It's headed up by a guy named Charles, or he goes by Chuck Marone. He was a civil engineer, still is, and did a lot of highway projects, bypasses, road windings, other types of sprawl-inducing projects. And he had this aha moment that these projects that were supposed to be good for the community were really kind of a Ponzi scheme. They were creating infrastructure liabilities that would only be paid for by new growth that wouldn't support itself. And eventually these new roads would have to be maintained and rehabilitated, and there wouldn't be any money for that. So he came through that route to a realization that communities needed to be more compact, and we needed to focus more on reviving the center than ever building outward. And through that, he became aware of Georgism and how the land value tax can support that approach. So there are a lot of people in the strong town movements. They're in mid and small size and some big cities all across the country. And it seems to be growing. And he's been a very strong advocate for our approach. So that's one ray of hope.
Would you repeat the name again?
The name of the group.
No, that's the name of the group, the name of the individual.
Well, the head of the group is a guy named Chuck Marone.
Okay.
That's MAROHN, I believe.
Well, one Dan arrives and another Dan leaves.
you
I'm being
just-
summoned. So
Okay.
love you all.
Take care,
Bye-bye.
Dan. Thanks for
Bye.
tuning in.
All right.
If you search on strong towns as a single word, you'll find them.
By the way, guys, I actually interviewed him for the Henry George School Smart Talk program. And in preparation for that interview, I read his book, A Bottom-Up Revolution to Rebuild American Prosperity, and wrote in preparation about a 20-page summary of the book to use in the conversation with him. So you might want to check out the interview at the Henry George School website. It was a good interview. I haven't checked to see how many viewings it's had, but he seemed to be pleased with it, and hopefully that nourished our relationship.
He also came to the Unconference in Oakland about 3 years ago, and it was very impressive and refreshing approach to things.
Well, my thought about, I didn't learn this from Walt, but I kind of learned it from Bill Coyne, and then Walt kind of exemplified it the same way Bill Coyne did, and Jack Wagner did, and some others, which was, I had always been involved in ideological groups. I was the county chair of the Greens in 1989, and of the Libertarians. And what I've slowly come to realize is that the people who have problems to solve are the people who matter, and that the Libertarians don't matter, and the Greens don't matter, and all the people who are there to sell an agenda don't matter as much as the people who are there to solve problems. And the problems are first. They're looking for any solution because what they have is a problem. And I think Georgists get into this competition of ideologies where it's like a convention of salesmen with no customers, and they're all trying to sell each other. And Walt was always targeting the people who had concerns and problems to solve, and not paying a whole lot of attention to the ideologies, not even to our ideology, except as it solved problems. If our ideology solves a problem, then it's, it's a tool in the toolbox. But I think that's the healthy approach. I think that's what works.
Well, do you agree with Dan's assessment?
Thank you, Dan. Well, I think we all have to keep remembering that this cause puts us in the same class as the abolitionists who fought slavery when slavery was still okay. So we're fighting for land justice when land monopolization is still very popular. People love it, and we're involved in a very, very important movement to get people to see the light that we're working on. And it's wonderful to be part of a great cause. It even adds years to people's lives to have a great cause to work on.
You're also such an inspiration to be so active at age 96. And I'm 72 and I count the years between where I am and you are. And I think, hey, I could be active another 25 years. All of us, look at, that's hundreds and hundreds of years we still have all together. Yeah. Okay, I see a hand from Polly. Did you put your hand up? Okay.
Yes, another very important movement that's sort of discovering us is the antitrust, anti-monopoly movement. All of these, I had Zephyr Teach out on the CGO, more recently, Richard John. Matt Stoller is a leader in the antitrust movement. He's got a newsletter on, I guess, a Substack, but I responded to something of Matt Stoller's a couple of days ago, in which I did not mention George, but I said that, the economists of Adam Smith's era were all anti-monopoly, and believe it or not, Matt Stoller responded by saying something about Henry George, and I hadn't even primed him for that. So there's a whole movement among the and that now there's some prominent anti-monopoly
She's a very
in the
bright
Biden
woman.
administration, and they're all talking about Henry George and restoring Henry George's anti-monopoly movement of the 19th century. So I think that that's major progress.
Yeah, great.
Have to get Matt.
I don't know if you heard Dad's side comment, Polly, but he said you're a very bright woman. And that's so true.
Well, thank you.
I'm wondering if I can jump in again and piggyback on that. And that is to mention the one thing is the Lincoln Institute is doing that a nice piece on value recapture and the whole value recapture activities going on, especially with Railvolution and others. But I wanted to mention the public banking angle. We in this country, we have our money is created by the banks, lent into existence, and then they collect interest on the money that they lend into existence. They create that money out of thin air, and we could create our own money out of thin air without the banks. But it seems to be a movement that's catching and moving forward, and I'm wondering if we could somehow join with them and learn from their successes. There's a number of states and cities that are starting public banks and trying to.
So Alan, our Baltimore group, which included Rick and Walt and a few others of us, Ed, Mike Curtis, had Walt McCrae, who's the senior advisor for the Public Banking Institute, speak with us a few weeks ago. Ellen Brown, who really is the figurehead, written 10 books, launched that movement, has interviewed me. Well, we had her speak at a CGO conference years ago, and then she interviewed me in 2015, and then again just a couple weeks ago. And she and I are now working on a program for April 10th called The Economics of War and Peace and the City of Baltimore. And we're going to talk about how, along with how the land and the money problems create a war system, how we can look at Baltimore as a template for how public banks and land value tax can work together.
Yeah,
And,
yeah. I'd love to hear more about that, Alana. And I'm wondering if Walt has any comment on this angle.
No, I learned from Alana on this.
Okay, great.
Also, just so you know that Walt McCrae and Ellen Brown will be speaking before the American Ethical Union as part of their annual assembly, which will be on Zoom. I don't have the particular dates, but they will actually be doing their session twice in June. Once I find out the details, they will, and I've already told the committee chair, I'm bringing the guys who really know Ellen and Walt. what are you doing? I said, these are my cookie monsters. They will be there and they will ask questions because they know the stuff. So we will be making that network.
Excellent. So happy.
There's also a Philadelphia City Council member that Josh Vincent has worked with, and he's interested in bringing together the public banks and the land value tax movement. So, hooray. So please, anyone else want to speak to appreciation of Walt Rybeck?
What about Mike O'Meara
and Michael Curtis? I see. Wonderful.
Yeah, Mike Curtis, hey. Got the two
Am I
mics,
on
and we've
now?
got Rick, and we've got Gib Halverson here, who's
okay. Michael, then Gib. Okay, go ahead, Mike.
All right. Hi, Walt. Nice to see you. I really appreciate all you've done. I remember I first met you at Heathcote in Maryland in about 1970.
Right.
You remember that, gang? That
Yes.
was a wonderful trip. And
Yes.
as a result, I went down there every week for months and taught the Henry George class.
Wonderful.
Yeah, that was a nice place, the School of Living. And of course, Artie Yetman became part of the Georgist movement as a result of that. So that's all. Nice to see you and thanks.
Thank you so much.
And Gib.
Walt, I think I met you in 1982, and you have been a steady hand in the Georgist movement, and that we've all learned from you. We've read your books, and we've gotten inspiration to keep us going for the long haul. I'm hoping that I can keep going as long as you have. I've only been in this movement for 40 years. And so I've got a little bit longer to go, but you have been an inspiration to all of us. And I thank you for giving us the guiding hand that you have.
Treasure your friendship very much. And when I got in the movement a little earlier than you, we knew about everybody who was involved here and abroad. Now, as I think Alana mentioned or somebody, the people are popping up all over that we don't know, and that's great. So that's good news, and it's nice that we've been in this important ride together.
Kept the flame alive. Well, it's starting to burn brighter.
Okay, I got some comments.
Michael Mara.
Yeah, Walt, I finally met you in person just a few years ago at a CGO conference, just very briefly, but really just getting to know you in recent months since our group working on Baltimore for the tax shifts in Baltimore. So it's very interesting, the comments I'm hearing, all the things you've accomplished, that your connections to Coretta Scott King, to Senator Douglas. Very interesting. I've got the impression, based on your comments and others, is that then the way that Martin Luther King heard about Henry George, was through your connection to Coretta Scott King? That's the impression I'm getting.
It's been nice to get to know you, Mike. Look forward to working together more.
And Mike asked if Martin Luther King's interest in Henry George came from you or from some other source?
I think it was from my connection. I gave Coretta Progress and Poverty and taught her. He had a hint of it. He didn't fully grasp the impact of Henry George, but he was starting. And yes, I did have a little, and we met maybe half a dozen or so times, but usually more about his work in civil rights than about economics as such.
Well, just to pick up on Mike's point there, was there anyone, because you started as early as you did, who was alive that you ever met who knew Henry George?
Oh, yes, I met people who knew Henry George. But I'm trying to think, did he die in just before the 1900s?
He died in
Yes.
1897.
Famous choreographer.
His daughter, of course,
Right.
Yeah,
daughter.
Granddaughter.
yeah, of
I think
course.
granddaughter.
No, his daughter was still alive. She died in 48.
I-
Then
I-
Agnes DeMille.
I had
Some of
Agnes
us,
De- Did
Agnes
you ever
DeMille
meet
was his
Agnes DeMille?
granddaughter.
Yes, I worked with that Agnes DeMille. She wanted to do a documentary about it, and I worked closely with Agnes. She was a lovely person, and she would have been great as a sociologist if she hadn't been great as a choreographer. Wonderful, wonderful person. Your dad met Agnes DeMille too.
I met her, she was giving a major talk on dance in San Francisco, and there was about 5 of us Georgists there from the Henry George School. So we went up and shook her hand and talked to her afterwards. And then I know others of us met her in the dedication of the Henry George birthplace in Philadelphia.
Well, I think in a way she did a documentary. It was a musical though called Oklahoma, and the land we belong to is grand, and other, other allusions to the land.
Yeah, but Oscar Hammerstein wrote those lyrics before she was involved. So.
Oh shoot. Well, anyway,
But she did write some great introductions to books, right? To Henry George books. Okay.
Well, this is Ed again. I just wanted to say that, the mentioning of Martin Luther King Jr. again, I have to say that when I give the talk on him in my classes at the 2 colleges where I've been teaching, it's always interesting for the responses I get from African Americans, because they don't really know much about Martin Luther King Jr.'s economic program to end poverty. So I get a very positive response from African American adults.
Interesting. Well, this has been quite an afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so if there's no one else to talk, most everybody has. Thank you so much. Sue, do you want to say anything?
We just thank you all.
Okay.
We will be the CGO. Alana mentioned her webinar on the 10th. The CGO will be on tax day, but that's a tax day that's been delayed by our government, but we will be on the 15th. The topic will be, we have to determine, we should have something interesting for you, and we'll put it out this coming week. So we thank you all for joining us on this. At least it's a gray day here in Indianapolis. I think so. And we are recording this and the like, so we'll be putting this up on the internet. We thank you for your patience. Thank you.
Thank you so much again, Walt.
Bye, Walt.
Bye, gang.
We love you, Walt.
Yeah. You're great, Walt.
The great Walt. That's it. Take care.